My name's Gemma Lelliott. I'm the Director for Wales at the Community Transport Association, and we are the membership body and infrastructure charity that supports the community-led not-for-profit transport sector across the UK. So we've got teams based in all 4 nations of the UK. We've got about 1,500 member organisations that we support right the way across the country. And of those, there are about 110 that are based in Wales. And it's a real mixture. If you haven't come across community transport before, I'm very aware there are a lot of people that the sector is not something that they've connected with in the past. So I thought I'd start by just talking a little bit about what the sector is and how it works for those of you that haven't come across it previously. Community transport means different things in different places and different things to different people. So we are very fortunate in Wales. We've got quite a wide variety of different styles of community transport operator, going from local authorities running their own transport services for people whose needs are not being met in their local communities, through to large bus operators running dial-a-ride and community bus services that connect people to where they want to go. We've got volunteer car schemes where neighbours will use their own vehicles to provide transport that connect people to things like hospital appointments, GP appointments, shopping, caring, all the kinds of responsibilities that go with living a normal life. We've got Wheels to Work schemes where people are able to lease a moped to get them back and forth to work, college or school. We've got car clubs is a growing sector in Wales, of which some CTA members are part, where a vehicle is sort of owned by the community for the community's use. There are commercial models of this, but I'm talking about the sort of CT approach to this, where it's about creating a resource that means that people don't have to rely on having a private car to be able to get to where they want to go, and they can sort of take on a shared ownership or a shared membership of a scheme where a vehicle is made available in a community for them to use. And we've got lots and lots of charities and youth groups and schools where they're part of the community transport network, but their transport is not necessarily the primary purpose of their work. Transport is an enabler for their core activity. So it might be getting kids to out of school activities. It might be connecting scouts and guides with outward bound work. It's really varied, and it's a thriving sector in Wales that is a really, really important, albeit small, part of the transport infrastructure for the country. We, as Beth said, if you've got any questions at any point, don't be afraid to interrupt, stick your real or virtual hand up if you wanted to ask something, but we'll have time to chat at the end of my sort of mini presentation as well. We are, as an organisation, we are funded through a mix of different activities. So we generate some of our own income through the sale of a training product, which is specific to the not-for-profit transport sector, which some of you might have heard of, called Midas. In addition to Midas and the training, the income that we generate through our network of training agents delivering Midas out in the community, we're also funded by the various governments around the UK and the Department for Transport to provide support on the ground to operators to deliver the work that they deliver. So we work very closely and have worked very closely with the Welsh Government, particularly over the last couple of years, as one of their core funded organisations providing support to the third sector in Wales. And the sort of shape and structure to that is created by something called Sgwrs Newydd, which is the Wales Transport Strategy, which was published in 2021. The team and I worked very closely with Welsh Government while that strategy was being drafted. And we've continued to work with the Welsh Government and colleagues across the civil service and Transport for Wales post-publication of the strategy to try and take the ideas that are in there and the concepts and the aspirations and turn them into something that actually delivers change in practice out in communities across Wales. So Sgwrs Newydd and the National Transport Delivery Plan, which was published last year, guide and shape all of the work that we do, and we embrace the vision that was set out in the strategy of an accessible, sustainable, inclusive and efficient transport system. And the key thing for us is the accessibility and inclusivity of that transport network. It's not enough that we shift towards a more passenger-focused transport network. It needs to incorporate all of the passengers and all of our diverse needs. And that sort of underpins all of the engagements that we have with all of the partners that we're working alongside. So fundamental to that at CTA, we believe that transport is a social justice issue, and access to transport is a social justice issue. It's about so much more than just getting from A to B. So thinking holistically about the ways in which transport, or the lack of it, can impact on all aspects of our lives, supporting more people to make the switch to sustainable transport modes has never been as important as it is today. Public and community transport have the power to be a great enabler, empowering people to live the lives they want without being forced to rely on a car. But at the moment, the lack of inclusive and accessible transport is disabling people across Wales every single day. If you're on a low income or are disabled, are an older person, live in a rural area, need to make multi-stop journeys or travel at non-core times or have caring responsibilities, for more than a generation, it's been really clear that the public transport system was not designed for you. Now, fortunately, going back to the point I was making about Llywelyn Newydd, Welsh Government and partners like the CTA are quite determined and sort of nailing our colours to the mast, I suppose, in turning that on its head, because as a nation, we have made that commitment that we're not comfortable and that's not enough anymore. We're working together collaboratively and positively to try to put people at the heart of planning and delivering a transport system that will be, once again, a true public service. It's obviously not going to be easy, especially as we are in the middle of a cost of living crisis and looking down the barrel of potentially more austerity to come. But the pressures, sort of taking that into account, it just makes it even more important that we create a transport network that both serves us now and preserves the well-being of future generations. Thinking about the climate and nature emergency, and in Wales, there's a significant part of our carbon emissions comes from transport. It's more than 17% of our carbon emissions as a nation comes from the transport sector, all aspects of the transport sector. It's really fundamental that we support people to reshape their travel habits. And a big part of doing that is making sure that the infrastructure is there for people to be able to use. And what our aspiration is, and the part that we try to play with that, is making sure that the planning and the implementation of that planning is done in such a way that it considers the needs of every part of the community that's being served by the providers in that community. So for whatever the reasons for your journey, your mobility support needs, your preferred travelling time, or your income bracket, we believe that we all need to see the public and community transport network as a viable and accessible option, even if it's for only some of the journeys that we make. So in order to deliver that in practice, the way that we work in CTA in Wales is quite varied. We've got a small team, so Welsh Government funding allows us to support not only CTA members, but anyone with an interest in accessible and inclusive transport. But we are quite a small team, so it does mean that we have to be quite canny, I suppose, in how we work alongside partners and developing our relationships with people in the community that share our aspirations and our goals. From my point of view, a big part of my role is about sort of influencing policy and influencing decision making as much as it's possible to do that. So trying to take the intelligence that we gather from the sector and from the partners that we're working alongside to influence the decisions that are being made. So more people are thinking about community transport as they are making plans or commissioning new services or developing new projects, but also thinking about the decisions that are being made by colleagues in the Welsh Government and local authorities, and trying to create the environment in which community transport is valued as an integrated part of delivering an effective transport network and delivering an effective support network for people who are living and working in Wales. Practically, that my sort of strategic overarching responsibilities is underpinned by the kind of development work and casework that we do on the ground. So I can see my colleague Emma is here with us on the call today as one of our development officers, and we've got one, Emma's based in South Wales, we've got another that's based in North Wales, and their responsibility is very much focused on ensuring that the day-to-day work of the community transport operator network is supported to work as well as it possibly can to ensure safe, legal and dignified transport services are available for people in an accessible and inclusive way across the country. It might be about doing some casework alongside an organisation that's looking to enhance their delivery or develop a new project. It might be about looking at fundamentals like sustainable funding sources. Often community transport operators are forced, as a result of a lack of direct funding coming from the Welsh Government to support the sector. It's a constant battle to make sure that you've got enough money coming in to continue to deliver the services that are so vital in the communities that they serve. So we do a lot of work around supporting organisations with their governance and funding arrangements and helping them to make connections with other organisations in different parts of the country, in Wales and across the rest of the UK, so that they can get access to not only expert advice from us as a team, but peer support and that kind of community around the delivery of the community transport sector. And what that means then is over the last couple of years particularly, we've had our kind of core functions as a team, and then we've also been able to develop and deliver a couple of different projects alongside the sector, which have allowed us to funnel funding into different parts of the transport network and pilot and trial different ways of delivering services. So we've got, I thought I'd just mention one or two of these today for time. In the southwest of the country, we've got a project called Western Valleys, where we were successful in securing some funding from Welsh Government through the Household Support Fund last year, and that allowed us to work alongside 4 of our members to pilot community-led, integrated and affordable decarbonised transport options. So piloting, it's been a mixture of vehicles. We've had minibuses, we've had food vans, we've had cars, we've had MPVs, we've had bikes, and it's the whole of the project is about creating sustainable transport options for people who are living on low incomes. But each community, each organisation has taken a slightly different approach to what that means based on what the community engagement has told them is needed in that area. So we've seen one operator focus really closely on working alongside schools and creating opportunities for young people and their families to be able to get outside the square mile of their local area, expand their horizons, connect with extracurricular activities, join a sports team, go on trips and get their parents involved as volunteers using the vehicles, being able to trial using electric vehicles for the first time, and just practically create resource that didn't exist within the mainstream transport network, where people were really struggling and therefore were really limited in what they were able to imagine for themselves. So that's been really exciting. And then on the other side of the patch, we've got an operator that is focused much more on supporting older people, because the community that their hub is based in, they have more than 30% of the local residents are older people that don't have access to a private vehicle. And there's one bus that runs through their village, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So there are no transport options for people if they haven't got a private car in that community. And what they've done with the funding is they've created a volunteer-led car scheme using an electric vehicle that runs from the community hub, and that connects the local food bank. It connects job seekers who are able to build volunteering opportunities into their CV. It's created opportunities for people to connect cross valley, which is really limited. There are no transport options across that valley. So actually allowing people to be able to minimise their journey times and therefore open up more capacity in their day and their week. So it's been really interesting to work alongside them and see how each of those operators has approached the challenge in the community that they're living in and working in. Something that's less sort of developed much earlier on is something that we're working on in North Wales at the moment, alongside a group of organisations, and not necessarily kind of incorporated organisations, some social groups and activity groups with and for people with learning disabilities. And over the last 12 months, we've had a number of conversations with partners that are working in this space or are themselves people with learning disabilities that want to be able to get out at the weekend or go and watch a gig on a Friday night or go and see their friends in the evening. And the limitations of the existing public transport network are such that basically, unless you've got someone who you can call for a lift, it's really, really difficult for you to be able to do any of those things. And that means that people are not able to work, not able to volunteer, not able to have a social life, not able to connect with their community, not able to have friends. And initially we were starting from the point of, right, well, you know, there are activities that are put on once a month. Are we able to organise a bus, for example, that gets people from the various places that they live into the activity that's happening in Wrexham or Rhyl or Ynys Môn or whatever it might be, and then get them home again so that we can solve that problem, which is great up to a point. But what we discovered, the more of these conversations that we were having, actually that fundamentally doesn't address the issue, the barrier that people are experiencing. It's about being able to live a good life and connect with your community in a way that has meaning for you. So it might be that for some people, a community transport option would be the best option because their support needs are such that they need that support from a driver with expertise around working with someone who's got additional mobility needs, for example. But it might be that what somebody needs is a little bit of support to get used to using the public bus system so that they would be able to make a much wider range of journeys that would enable them to live independently in their community and therefore be less likely to interact with social services, have less of a need to interact with care teams, and just generally be able to live a life that has meaning for them. So we've sort of we went quite a long way down the conversation, and then we've raked ourselves back and we've engaged with Aberystwyth University to do a lot more exploratory work around what are the barriers that people are experiencing and how we can bring partners together to develop a solution that is much more wide-ranging, much more open, much more led by the people who are going to be benefiting from it. It's going to take a lot longer, and it's going to be, I would say, probably one of the more challenging, feels like the wrong word because I think there's a negative connotation to challenge, but I think challenge in a really good way. I think it's going to push us to think differently and engage with people in different ways. And therefore we'll end up with something that's much more positive and much more sustainably embedded in the community at the end of it. But it is going to mean it's going to be a lot more about collaboration than it is about us coming in as a problem solver. So that's going to be a really interesting journey for us because we haven't really done anything in that space previously. So I'm really excited about what that looks like and how that works. What I thought I'd finish by talking just very briefly about is why I care about this stuff as much as I do, and why I think other people should care about it as much as I do. I'm sure not many people are ever going to be as passionate about community transport as I am. Maybe John, I can see, might be. But it's, yeah, I've worked in access and inclusion for about 13 years now, and it was a very deliberate decision for me when I had my daughter, who's now 13 and a half. I had been working in the private sector up until then and enjoyed my job. I worked as a trainer, like all over the country, delivering training to other private sector organisations. I was good at my job and I enjoyed it. I was well paid for it. But I always felt like there was a hole, there was a gap that wasn't being filled by the work that I was doing. And it's... When I had my daughter, I was also traveling a lot, which was really hard, especially when you're massively pregnant, which I was. But it was, I discovered it as an opportunity, I suppose. When I was on maternity leave, I took the time to have a think about what I actually wanted to be doing and how I could fill that hole and think about how I could have a bit more meaning in the work that I was doing. And I started working in social services, and I was working alongside people with physical disabilities, people with acquired brain injury, people with learning disabilities, people with quite serious mental health concerns. and supporting them to overcome the barriers that they were experiencing around employment, education and training. And I'm quite willing to admit that I had been quite naive up until that point, and I learned an awful lot in the first couple of years of doing that job. But fundamentally, I suppose what I learned over and above anything else was that the vast majority of people who are unemployed or underemployed or excluded, it's not about the barriers from that person's kind of individual complaint or disability or condition that they live with. Structurally, as a society, we do not support people to live a good life. We systemically have to battle against barriers that are put up in our way constantly every single day. And if you're a disabled person, or if you're an older person, or if you're a carer, those barriers become exponentially more difficult to overcome. And I think over the years, I've done a number of different jobs since that time. That was back in 2010. And what I keep coming back to all of the time is that question about what a good life is and how people can live a good life. And what a good life means and what a good life looks like is different for all of us. Absolutely. We're all individuals. We're all unique. We all have different things that float our boat. And I think what I've seen since coming into the community transport sector is fundamentally transport has the potential to be an enabler of a good life for an awful lot of people. But currently, it's not even part of the conversation when services are being commissioned or new projects are being developed. So housing estates being built on the edges of town where there isn't even a bus stop that's put in place when the housing development is finished by the developer, or a GP surgery is old and it's falling down, and the local authority will say, right, well, there's a parcel of land, we can build a new GP surgery and it'll be a super surgery, and we'll bring 3 of these older decrepit buildings, we'll close them down, bring all the GPs together and create this really exciting community resource that everyone will be able to access, and it'll have loads more services, and it's built on the top of a hill, and there's no bus and there's no bus stop, and if there is a bus stop there's no shelter, so if your appointment comes to an end and it's pouring with rain, you're standing in the rain. There's so many of these decisions that are being made that are creating additional barriers to that good life, and I think there are huge opportunities, and that's one of the things that we try to focus on in the way that we work in such a small team in CTA, is by working in positive partnership and developing collaboration, we have a much greater opportunity to influence and change the way that those decisions are being made. So we would like to get to a point where every time a new housing development is proposed, transport is one of the things, it should be anyway, as part of the new kind of WellTag proposals and system. I know it isn't being, because that's the reality of what we've seen over the last, even just in the last 5 to 10 years. Are you having conversations with the people who are going to be living in that community about how they would like to be able to get to and from that community out to wherever it is that they want to travel to? Are you thinking about the widest range of people that might be living in that community and their needs? Are you thinking about shared transport, or are you thinking about private transport? And that, fundamentally, it's not just about the community transport sector, it's about public transport more generally. And are you commissioning your suppliers in such a way so that it creates opportunity for that social value to be delivered in practice? Fundamentally, what I would like, from Welsh Government and local authorities and health boards, is they're making these kind of fundamental changes that are about benefiting people that live in Wales and work in Wales. Are you thinking about transport? If you're thinking about how you can help people to live a better life, are you thinking about transport? And if you're not, can we help you to do that? And that's it. I was aiming for half an hour.
Lovely. Oh, that's pretty much spot on. Well done. Thanks, Gemma. That was really, really interesting. I've got a couple of questions I was going to ask, but I want to open it up to anyone else first. I don't know if anyone else has got any questions they wanted to ask Gemma. No? Okay, I'll jump in then. So I really like the point you made about giving people a good life. I think that's just kind of, and when I think about transport, it seems like such an obvious kind of key link to that. And the question I was sort of thinking about, because I was thinking it back to like where I live and kind of the village that I live in, and kind of how, because I'm not sure people are aware of some of the, you know, the schemes and support that's in place to actually do these kind of things. So in terms of like the schemes that are kind of led by the community, the sort of small communities. I think you mentioned about the so people don't have to rely on having a private car. There's kind of a car that, you know, the community can use. How do people actually, you know, look into that, and like what steps would they need to take to kind of get that in place?
Yeah. I think from our point of view, that's one of the areas where CTA is not as strong as it needs to be. So we've got knowledge as an organisation in terms of what the CT sector looks like at the moment, but our website is pretty poor, frankly, and we're in the process of redeveloping that so that we can host some of that information and make it available more widely. What we've been talking to Transport for Wales and Travel and Cymru about is how we might be able to get more information about the community transport sector hosted as part of their journey planning software, so that if someone was looking for a journey, you know, they're travelling to Wrexham for the first time, for example, and they wanted to find out how they could get from A to B, the community transport options would come up alongside bus, alongside trains, alongside active travel. The challenge that we've got is the vast majority of what we call primary purpose community transport operators, where that's their bread and butter. The services are demand responsive rather than timetabled, so that makes it really difficult to integrate with the journey planning software as it works at the moment. But what we're hoping to explore this year is ways in which we can resolve some of that, the barriers around that. So we've been doing a kind of mapping exercise to get a fully up-to-date data set so that we can feed that into our website development in the first instance and create more visibility around what the schemes are and how they work in Wales and how people would be able to get in contact with them. I think around the car clubs, because that's still it's sort of a nascent sector in Wales. We've only got 2 or 3 established car clubs that are not part of like enterprise, those kind of commercial organisations. And they tend to be in like Cardiff has got quite a big commercial operation for car clubs, and enterprise do that really, really well. The vast majority of Wales, it's not commercially viable for a car club to run under a commercial model because there aren't enough people in those communities to support a vehicle in a way that would make a profit for an operator. So we've been working with a group, the project's called Charge Up Wales, and they were able to secure funding from the lottery year before last to actually kick this off. And they are working alongside 7 rural communities in Wales in the first round to fund and roll out vehicles that will be community owned assets with charging infrastructure. So people will be able to connect with that vehicle and use it either instead of having their own car or in addition to, if they've, you know, looking to make that change from having 2 cars down to 1 car, for example. So each one of those, the energy is going into local community consultation and engagement so that people in the local area become aware of it before anybody else does. And hopefully that will mean that people will feel that they've got more of an ownership stake in the vehicle being there and becoming embedded as a resource that people can use. But we'd like to see that grow quite significantly. And we're exploring how, because the CT operator network is really well connected and embedded in these local communities. They know their local communities and serve them really, really well. We'd like to explore opportunities for some of those community transport operators to become kind of a landlord to a car club and create space for a car club to run alongside their community transport organisation and create an additional network of ways in which people can connect with a more sustainable way of travelling.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I think the journey mapping, did you say, or journey planning, that'll be a huge kind of asset to people, won't it, to kind of just be able to see exactly what's available. And in terms of just kind of as an aside of that then, so some of the volunteer car schemes that are running, have you found, obviously, you know, with cost of living, cost of fuel and all that kind of stuff, is there still kind of a willingness for people to sign up to those kind of volunteer, or have you seen kind of a bit of a decline in that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's affected an awful lot of the volunteers that are part of the CT sector. So we have our teams across the UK have been part of a campaign trying to push the government to increase the approved mileage payment limit that volunteers are able to receive. Because as it stands at the moment, it's sort of based on the employee model, so you can receive up to 45 pence a mile without incurring any kind of tax penalty as a volunteer in the sector. But 45 pence a mile once upon a time, that would have meant that you would comfortably cover the costs of being a volunteer and supporting your community, and probably even earn a little bit extra to top up your income somewhere else, although it wasn't what it was designed to do. Now we've seen a number of people who had previously retired. They've gone back to work because they can't afford to live on their retirement income anymore, and therefore we've lost them from the community transport sector. We've seen others have to stop volunteering because they can't afford to keep supporting people using their own vehicle, because the 45 pence a mile just isn't covering all of the costs of the fuel and the vehicle maintenance and keeping it clean and the PPE and all of the different elements that go hand in hand with delivering a service like that. So volunteer recruitment and retention is always a challenge for the sector, and especially for community transport operators where they're running larger vehicles. So we've got limitations around who can drive a larger vehicle, for example. So that's always a bit of a challenge that we are working to try and develop new routes for volunteers to connect with the sector. But I think particularly the last 12 months, it's been extremely difficult, and we've seen, having come off the back of COVID, where we saw quite because of the demographic of your typical community transport volunteer, a lot of those people during COVID were forced to shield and therefore stopped volunteering and have never come back. We saw quite a big influx during that time of new volunteers that had been furloughed and therefore had more time available. So they volunteered their time and got involved with CT and really enjoyed it. But then when their job restarted and they were back into the normal run-of-the-mill day-to-day, actually a lot of the time volunteering doesn't work in that context to be able to volunteer in the way that a lot of CT providers rely on. So it's a really challenging kind of environment at the moment around volunteer recruitment and retention. There's one of the things that we're going to be working really closely with the operator network on over the next 12 months as one of our priority areas.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. That was, yeah, they were my questions anyway. I don't know if anyone else wanted to come in. John, yeah, do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Gemma. Don't think we've ever actually met. But
no, I don't think we have. It's lovely to see your face.
Just to let you know, my son used to work for Gemma and CTA.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've just completed some work for the Community Council doing a review on community transport. And one of the things, and it's bugged me for a number of years, and that is actually with regard to the ownership of vehicles, there's a very preciousness that groups that actually are successful in raising funds and grants, they do wonderful applications and say how their vehicles will be used by the broader community. But inevitably, we find that vehicles become specific to the organisation they're applied, whether it be a school PTA, whether it be a scout group, a church group, and people like that. So quite often, I think there's a huge amount of assets, transport assets potentially available. And yet the key issue quite often is around how organisations can get the keys for that to be able to use that vehicle. As a ex-chief officer for the County Voluntary Council, I mean, one of the things, people would come to us seeking funding for a minibus. And when we actually sat down and chatted with them, there was probably a vehicle within quite a short distance. So we said, what you need to be doing first is having a chat with the people who've got the vehicle and see how you get the keys. And that includes public sector as well, because a lot of local authorities have got vehicles which have got downtime, health exactly the same, ambulance service as well. So I think before we start considering there's a need for capital investment in vehicles, it's around maximising the use of what's there.
I totally agree. And strangely, it's one of the areas, the work that I used to do in the past, it was really, really difficult to get capital investment through funding. is the opposite since I've joined CT. You know, generally there are pots that you can bid into to get a vehicle, to get a minibus or to get a charger or whatever. It's much more challenging to get the revenue support that you need in order to be able to pay for a coordinator or pay for a driver and make sure that services are sustainable in the longer term. So I think there's a massive opportunity, I think, especially as you mentioned, John, around the vehicles that have got that downtime that are already in the fleet, particularly in local authorities and health boards. We discovered recently there's a project that we've been running for the last couple of years alongside the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board down in Gwent. And they were like, just mentioned as an aside, oh, well, you know, we procure vehicles to deliver some support. They pay all kinds of different pots of funding out to transport providers to get their patients to and from the hospital settings. But they also have a lease arrangement for vehicles to come in and come out as they need them to provide additional support. And they pay for taxis and they're supporting the community transport sector. So I think there's a lot of inefficiency as a result of this lack of information. And that's one of the things which hopefully once we've done the base level mapping with the community transport operators, we'll be able to build layers on that to actually start to capture some of the intelligence that is only sitting within those teams around what vehicles have got downtime, have already been purchased, where are they, how they could be maximised so that the wheels are turning for more hours of the day. And especially for me, going back to the North Wales work, people that want to travel outside of Monday to Friday 9 to 5, there's so many of them, and those transport needs are not being met. And I think if we were able to tap into a pool of volunteers that aren't able to volunteer during the week because they're working and would still like to be able to make a positive contribution in their community, and vehicles that are parked up in a depot over the weekend because they're not being used on school runs, how we might be able to bring those together and create additional resource that Wales would be able to tap into, I think is a really exciting opportunity.
Can you just mention one other point on the health side? It's a number of years ago when I came across it, but Hereford and Worcester at the time for health appointments, if somebody needed transport, they would actually book the transport at the time of the appointments, and they had direct access into the CT transport availability in the area as well. And they actually found that they reduced the no-shows for patients who couldn't, for whatever reason, get transport. They reduced it by over 50%. And I think that's got to be a win-win for the patient and the health board to actually come up with that type of a model where the added journeys were making the transport down there more sustainable, but equally the cost to the health service for a non-attendee is a massive amount. So that always struck me as being a really good model if it could be adapted.
Yeah, I think transport to health as an area generally across the country is a massive development area, and it's something which an awful lot of community transport organisations commit a lot of time and resource to in order to support people in their community as well as they can. But again, I think it comes back to visibility and understanding what's in your area and how you can connect with it. But also, I think a big part of it is knowing the right people in the health board or in the local authority who are making those decisions. Certainly what we've seen with the work that we've been doing with Aneurin Bevan is that for the people that know about the services that are available, referral rates have significantly increased, and that funding support that the health board has been able to put in place has meant that more journeys have been able to be made. And those are journeys that would have been refused because they weren't eligible for non-emergency patient transport support. So I think, there's definitely a huge amount of work that could be done there. What we find challenging is each health board approaches that completely differently. They have different teams, different structures, and teams that often change quite radically in short periods of time. So you might develop a really productive relationship with one person only to find that they've been moved into another department and you have to go back to the beginning and start the whole process over again. I'd love to have information going out to every GP surgery and every ward to say, here are your local community transport providers and here is a direct link and a single point of contact. I don't know whether the CT network would appreciate that, I've got to be honest, because they're all quite independent from each other. But I think that we could make things much more efficient for the people who are looking to buy those services in and make it easier for them to be able to book journeys that will meet patients' needs.
Lovely, thanks, Gemma. Was there any more questions? Sean, did you want to come in?
We've got Catherine has her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Catherine, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just sort of, I mean, the whole thing with community transport, I find, is that there's lots of solutions out there and you hear about them, but I'm the equalities officer manager with Ceredigion Council, so I work with refugees and coordinate poverty plans and you know, try and get people with protected characteristics to where they want to be, and you know, fair service for everyone. And we've you know, I've heard about different schemes and spoken not recently with our local community transport coordinator with our CBC, but and it all sounds like really good, but then when you try to actually access this for a particular individual or a person for a particular service or event or visit, there's always, oh, it's not quite, no, it doesn't quite, and that's probably down to lack of funding, and myself who commission services, when I get money to do it, I should be thinking about that when I am designing the services, so I have clocked that. But yeah, it's that joined upness, I think, and it's always like, oh, community transport, yeah, brilliant, fantastic, but then it doesn't seem to work, and I'm not sure whether it's a different barrier with each specific occasion. And then the other thing that I've noticed, I work with, you know, food banks and lots of the voluntary sector, and everyone across the board is saying that they're really struggling with volunteer recruitment at the moment. And I know our country cars, hospital transport, they've just said no, they can't help really with health appointments anymore unless it's for specific reasons, because they haven't got the volunteers.
I think, I mean, the commissioning environment makes some of those decisions really challenging, because I know, like the country cars example, for example, there's a specific service that's paid for under that contract. So anything that goes outside of that contract means that they're in a really difficult position. Even if they have got the capacity to do it, that's not what they're being paid for. And therefore, are they actually able to take on that journey? We've seen that in a number of places, actually, because I mentioned earlier on about the kind of lack of core funding for operations. What we find is that CT operators will combat that by either bidding for a specific pot of grant funding that will allow them to service a specific project, or they'll bid in to deliver a contract for a local authority, for example, for home to school transport or for a community bus route. And that then means that they are tied to either what the project objectives are, if it's project grant funding, or delivering on that contract for the local authority. So we've had a conversation recently with an operator in South East Wales, and they are struggling they're having to turn people away from booking direct journeys, as you've described, Catherine, where you've got Mrs. Jones that needs to get down to the hospital for a hospital appointment. But actually, the bus that she would need to access is already on the road at that time doing a home to school trip for a kid that's got disabilities. And that then means you're having to turn one person away in order to meet the need somewhere else. And that makes for a really, really challenging environment for a CT operator to be the solution to some of those problems. And I do think there are some places where we've seen, like the conversations we've had recently around bus funding changing and what the network is going to look like and all the rest of it. Maybe community transport can step in and solve all of these problems. Probably not, realistically, because actually what we're seeing is the vast majority of the operators that we're working alongside, they're already far exceeding the number of journeys that they were delivering before the pandemic. They're having to turn people away week after week. And that then leads to probably duplication where, right, okay, we've got a project that is focusing on asylum seekers and refugees in Swansea, for example. They were a community group and they secured funding from the lottery because the nature of the group that they were supporting, very, very limited income, people that were having to travel from one end of Swansea to the other because of the GP being over here. The flat they'd been allocated was over there. Their English lesson was 3 miles away this way, and they only get £37 a week to be able to cover all of their costs. So that centre actually ended up securing funding and developing their own community transport network to meet the needs of that specific group of beneficiaries. And actually, probably that need could have been met somewhere else, but the restrictions in the system really, really get in the way at times. And I think there's work that could be done around how we bring those things together and eliminate some of those barriers. But I do think sometimes it is about like we've seen with the warm hubs in recent months, lots and lots of local authorities and voluntary sector organisations have received funding to have warm hubs for people to come to in the community, and almost none of them allocated funding towards how people were going to get to them. So and it's I would say the majority of the places that I've spoken to, that's because they didn't think about it. And the assumption is that people will be driven there or drive there themselves. But actually, you're talking about the kind of people that will need to spend time in a warm hub. They might not have a family network. They might not have someone that could take them. They might not have a car that they would be able to use. They might not be able to access the bus network. And therefore, it's a service that's being provided that's really, really valuable. But the connection hasn't been made in terms of how people are going to access it. So that's why we're trying to get a little bit further up the chain with some of the influencing work that we're doing to get people to think about, well, if you are funding something like this in the community, build transport into the plan for that funding, build it into your questions. Is it something that you're going through and saying, right, okay, well, before we give you this money, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you talked about transport? And can we help you to do that? And
you know what, I think that's a very valid point. And I was part of developing the Warm Welcome Spaces network in Ceredigion, and nobody really knew what was going to happen or how it would work or who would come or what their needs would be.
Yeah.
So it was, I think maybe now if Welsh Government release funding for winter 2023, people will have more of an idea, and it's something that we could include perhaps in the next one. But again, it's difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of people were coming here anyway. I mean, they were saying this because they were lonely and isolated at home, not because they needed somewhere warm or some food to eat. And many of them were driving, and people were sharing lifts and things, which is good for community resilience.
Absolutely, yeah.
So then you're down to maybe 2 people who want to come who haven't got that network. But then I suppose you just need a car then, or a taxi.
Potentially, yeah. And community transport is not always the answer. I think it's really important that we take that on board as we work alongside partners. I think a lot of people, it might just be that you need a little bit of help navigating the bus the first time, or maybe the first couple of times that you go somewhere. So
there's no buses around here.
Well, yeah, there's challenging in Ceredigion, isn't it? But it's about kind of meeting people where they are, I suppose. And the more information you've got, the more likely you are to be able to do that.
So maybe the next time, sort of encouraging people to add a sort of slush fund pot for transport, so people could, so they could say, we'll cover your taxi fare if you can't get a lift, but there's only this amount of money in it. So share lifts if you can. But yeah. And
what we're trying to do with funders, like there's a number of sort of smaller community-based funders in Wales, and trying to get them to think about when someone bids into them for a project or for an activity that's happening in the community, can you also ask them the question, well, how are people going to get there, and how are they going to access it, and how are they going to get home afterwards, and have you connected with your local community transport provider? Is there a joint opportunity there? I think there's a lot of just small fringe conversations that, well, like Beth was saying, you don't go to as many events, you don't get to talk to people in the same way, so you don't have that kind of subtle osmosis of information. But hopefully we can get people to just think about asking those questions and hopefully answering them a little bit more often.
I think there's also something around the organisations that run activities as well, is taken into account. If they are going to say, right, we'll find some funding and we'll pay for your taxi. Well, realistically, in a lot of areas, you can't get a taxi from 8:15 in the morning till at least 9:30. You can't get one between 2:30 and 4 o'clock. So there's something around that as well, isn't there? Around that, the commercial operators themselves are blocked out for schools. Just going back on the car side, the work that I was doing as Kevin Community Council here in Wrexham, which covers part of the World Heritage Site. one of the things that struck me from the census figure was there's 2,500 houses in the combined communities, but the vehicle ownership actually was 2,600. And it just seemed a peculiar anomaly that you've actually got more vehicles than actually houses, but equally you've got a significant transport problem in the area as well. You know, how you actually marry those up is going to be quite difficult. But
a lot of properties have more than one car anyway, don't they? I mean, I think when they're looking at designing new homes now, they say you've got to factor in parking space for 2 cars per property. So if you work from that factor, it means that there's 2,400 properties. There should be 4,800 cars.
But then the reality is in Wales, it's over a quarter of the population doesn't have access to a private car at all. So you've got quite a big disparity. That might be about income, it might be about ability, it might be about barriers to drive in. And therefore, there are a lot of people whose transport needs are not being met on one hand or the other. And those are the places where when there's a new development being planned, for example, we're trying to convince people to think about, well, could you put in a place for a shared car and charging infrastructure so that people in that community don't have to rely on having their own car? They might be able to tap in that community resource, or for the local community transport provider to come in a couple of times a day and pick people up from that community and take them into the local village or whatever it might be, to think a little bit differently about the way that they're making these plans and working alongside the community to design them.
One restriction, I don't know, it's something that somebody might have an answer or could find it afterwards. If somebody's actually purchasing a vehicle through Motability, there is apparently a condition with Motability that they're not permitted to give people lifts who are not part of the family. And if we talk about the kind of disabled people, inevitably they will have friends who are the same. So that they might have a neighbour who wants to go to the same function as them, but how much of a restriction and a barrier that is. I mean, it just doesn't seem logical if that is the thing. I would have assumed once the vehicle is being paid for, then the vehicle becomes that person's. But to have a restriction like that doesn't seem fair.
I mean, my impression is that's a hangover from when the personal independent payment was transitioned over, and Motability, we work quite closely with Motability on a number of different things, including the My Desk transformation I mentioned earlier on in the session. They are committed to creating a better environment for more disabled people to be able to travel. So I'm more than happy to flag that with the partners that we work with, to just say, realistically, is this something that is enforced anywhere? I'd be very surprised if it is, but is it something that could be removed, and therefore more people would be able to benefit from vehicles being in the area that they live? More than happy to take that forward.
Brilliant, thanks, Gemma. I think,
Can I just ask you a very quick question, Beth?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
I'm not putting you on the spot, Gemma, but in your view, do you think that the funding climate for social sort of enterprises for community transport has improved, or has it got worse over the last few years? Are there more opportunities there? I know we need to spend money in the most efficient, effective way, obviously, and as Jonathan mentioned earlier, sometimes it's just a matter of looking what's in the next community or what else are the options. But and it's not just a matter of everybody jumping on the same, what's in fashion in terms of funding, but
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging one from the point of view of the transport funding and funding from the Welsh Government to support transport. That's a really challenging one, because Welsh Government as a whole have much less money than they need to be able to do all the things that have been set out in the various programme for government and Llwybr Newydd and everything else. I think there's a real appetite from their point of view to support the growth of the sector and see it more closely integrated with the rest of the transport network. But the reality of delivering that is quite challenging in an environment where the core funding, the bus service support grant, has been static for more than a decade, and there's no sign that they'll be able to increase that in the next few years at least. I think what we have got in Wales is much more of a focus on that foundational economy, and the work that Lee Waters and Vaughan Gething did in the previous government around creating the environment for social enterprise to succeed has been really important. And we've seen a number of organisations shift into a more entrepreneurial way of working over the last couple of years, and that's been really positive. But I do think it's, you know, we still in Wales, the majority of the organisations we're working alongside are small community-led charities that are focused on the need that's in their local area. Having the capacity to pick your head up and think about development opportunities is beyond an awful lot. So that's one of the areas which we're trying to plug our resource into at the moment, and work alongside partners like Compass so that we can get people the support that they need to take those opportunities on and thrive in an environment which is extremely challenging for any kind of business. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I suppose if there's that pattern of local groups receiving a vehicle, and I know, as I think it was John mentioned earlier, that, you know, we have to prove that the demand is there and all that, and, you know, they're going to work with different groups. You know, they can be quite precious, can't they? As was mentioned, we've got that situation locally here, where we've got a minibus. One of our age wells has been using it, but because of local politics, they don't want another sort of wellbeing group to be using it. But that's something for us to smooth out. But no, that was good food for thought. Thank you for today's session.
Yeah, no problem. And if we can assist in any way, Aled, more than happy.
Yeah.
I'm
supposed to be meeting up with Michelle Clark quite soon, and we haven't met her for a while, so hopefully we can move things forward here as well.
Yeah,
so thank
great.
you.
We will have we've got a new development officer that's just started that's focusing on North Wales as well, Aled. So she comes from a community transport background as part of a network in Shropshire. So hopefully she'll be a useful person to connect up with as well.
Has she started?
Yes, she started 2 weeks ago. So she's going to be getting in contact with everybody in the area over the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone. I'm just conscious of time. We've just run slightly over, but I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for all your questions. It's been a really, really interesting session. And thank you, Gemma, as well. It's been so great to hear about some of the stuff you're working on, and kind of your passion is so clear, and it's been really inspiring. So thank you. What I was going to suggest is, Gemma, if you're happy for us to share your contact details with the group, if that's okay.
Yeah,
just because I am conscious of we probably could have gone on a bit longer, but I'm just conscious of everyone's time. So if anyone's got any further questions, we're obviously more than happy to share Gemma's details. And as I said at the start, what we'll do is the recording of this, it'll go up on our website in the next week or so. So feel free to kind of share that with colleagues, or, you know, look back at some of the conversations we've had. So, thank you again, everybody. And we are, as I said, we are running these sessions kind of monthly. They're on a range of different topics. So keep a lookout in your inbox for the next one. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.